I bring greetings and peace on behalf of the Council of Elders. As you know, I'm supposed to have been saying that for a while, so I owe you a few. Anytime Jesus tells a parable or frankly says an aphorism or tells a story or opens his mouth ever, it's probably a good idea to think about where the surprise is. This has gotten harder to do after 2,000 years or so of people telling us what everything he ever said means and getting it wrong more or less every time, taking all of the edge out of it, taking all of the bite out of it. Understanding the surprise and shock with Jesus a lot of the time means that we need to unlearn all of that nonsense, unlearn anything that the church taught us that makes it feel good about itself. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Jesus had zero interest in making a church that wouldn't exist for another couple of decades or centuries feel good about itself. And unlearn all of the other nonsense, anything that smug, self-loving church ever told you about shame. We aren't having any lessons today about that kind of humility that was beaten into us as kids, for some of us literally. None of that depravity theology, or behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. None of that. We have done those things which we ought not to have done, and there is no good in us, and so on. So we're clear. I'm going to put myself in the Marianne Williamson camp, although these days that's not as easy as it used to be. When she writes, we ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. So that's the takeaway. If anybody wants to skip out early, now you know. It's not about depravity or shame. You are deeply loved. You are embraced by excellence and goodness. But I want to be clear as well that we won't have any lessons today that make us feel especially comfortable either. It won't make us feel smug or satisfied. Jesus' parables want us uncomfortable and humble. Jesus wants us deeply loved and embraced, but also surprised and unbalanced. To recover the shock and surprise of this sermon, we probably need to move away from a Pharisee and a tax collector as the central characters. The Pharisee being unjust and treating the tax collector unjustly is supposed to be shocking. At the time, it was shocking. But over the last couple of centuries of Christian imagination, Pharisees and tax collectors have traded places somewhat, and we've lost a sense of who these people were. My boyfriend, John Dominic Crossan, says that we could think about this in the modern terms of a pope and a pimp went into St. Peter's to pray. But that doesn't really work as well anymore either in a modern post-Catholic sexual abuse scandal era. The Pharisee is not the twisted caricature that we've made him out to be. He's not a villain twirling his mustache over a woman tied up on the railroad tracks. The Pharisee is dedicated to observing the law. This one went above and beyond what was required. He fasts twice as much. He ties on everything, not just his own food and animals, in case the people who were supposed to didn't. He's sort of the person today who's in church every Sunday, who puts a check in the plate every week for more than 10% of his income, who serves on the board of directors and visits congregants in the hospital. He's a good guy. He's a well-mannered guy, a mild-mannered guy, a righteous and observant, law-abiding and faithful guy. The Pharisee is John Fisher, folks. Are you following me? The Pharisee is Alva Bostic. We need to cook with oil here. The Pharisees were pillars of church and society. The tax collector isn't a saint or a hero either. This is important too. Some of us have taken Matthew and rehabilitated the tax collector, turned him into a harmless, wee little man. But tax collectors were rotten, no good, terrible. The tax system then as now was designed so that people were bled dry. In antiquity, someone had to go without proper life, material sufficiency, basic human dignity, life space, in order to generate a surplus. Taxes were set by bid. The highest bidder received the contract. The people had to come up with those funds promised to the Roman imperial machine, plus the tax collector's cut, and it was brutal. Tax collectors were traitors, they were religiously unclean, they were hated for cause. So the Pharisee is James Lane, a good guy, a righteous guy, and the tax collector is a farmer bro, jacking up the price of HIV meds and EpiPens. The tax collector is a QAnon believer wielding a flagpole at the Capitol Police to stop certification of ballots on January 6th. I want to argue that the tax collector is 3 white men who chased and assaulted and murdered Ahmaud Arbery when he was jogging in Glenn County, Georgia. And that feels as extreme as Luke's Jesus is being. To understand the surprising and unsettling depth of what Luke's Jesus is saying, we have to know how very good the Pharisee is and know how very bad the tax collector is. The surprise of the parable has to be palpable. It maybe has to be painful. Evan Swanson wasn't justified. A Proud Boy was justified. The world has gone mad, Jesus. You've gone mad, Jesus. Up is down, left is right. And I'm not even sure I'm joking. This is madness. All is not right in heaven and on earth. We know that coming to church isn't enough, that tithing and fasting and teaching Sunday school and being on the worship team and leading the congregational care team and going to the nursing home to sing carols isn't enough. We know about I despise your feasts, says God in Amos 5. Your burnt offerings are a foul stench to me. We know that Jesus was an observant Jew and that he broke the rules all the time whenever the rules hurt people. It's not about the rules. So it doesn't matter how religiously observant and righteous and salt of the earth and pillar of the community the Pharisee is. And now we're going to stop comparing the Pharisee to our friends, because now we're going to talk about where the Pharisee took a hard left. He may have gotten so much exactly right, but he is critically unright in his contempt for the tax collector. So remember how I just said that the tax collector is a skank? A rotten, pension-stealing colonizer who cheats poor people and old people and trips pregnant people? Jesus is saying that there's something worse than being that guy. That what is worse than being a tax collector is being contemptuous of a tax collector. What's worse than being an evil, rotten schmuck is thinking that you are better than one. It would be easy to make this about the run-of-the-mill stuff that we do every day without batting an eye. The contempt we show, for example, to people who wear their pajamas to Walmart. Whatever we're casually cruel and smug about. The person texting and driving, the person sagging their pants, the people eating pizza with a fork. But I don't think that Jesus wants this to be light and superficial. He was talking about the really bad, contemptible people, the ones so awful, so alien, that we think they're not human. We think that they're beneath us. People who shoot through their front door at Renisha McBride as she begs for help after a car accident. People who refuse hormone blockers to trans kids trying to buy some time with their bodies. People who refuse autoimmune disease medicine to a 14-year-old who is not pregnant because it can also induce an ectopic abortion for people who are about to die from an ectopic pregnancy. Certain politicians, Tucker Carlson, people who laugh at rape survivors and defend rapists because of movies or baseball or football. People who hit their kids in the grocery store. Jesus is saying that there's something worse than these folks, even these. And it's us when we have contempt for them. I'm not going to talk much today about the tax collector being justified. That's somebody else's business. The universe, maybe, ultimate reality. That's the business of someone or something else that has more power and that is more good than me. I'm very cool with repentance. I hope that every person who hurts kids and applauds the Confederacy and touches anyone without permission all beat their breast and say, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Amen. The justification part, though, is not mine to give. I'm not going to tell Oscar Grant's family that the police who cried at the hearing is justified. Jesus would, I guess. He seems to be here. Jesus was bold, though. And I feel like that is too much for me. I want all the evildoers to cry and beg forgiveness, but they'll have to get their justification elsewhere. I am, though, accountable for my contempt. You are accountable for your contempt. I'm going to talk about that, though. I'm going to talk about how maybe all of us feel or have or show contempt for someone, think that someone is so other as to be beneath us. And we are accountable for it before the throne of justice. Maybe that's a future thing for you. Maybe it's a right now accountability. But even when our goodness is tied to our passion for justice, as it is for so many of us, our contempt for its offenders takes us outside of its reign. It's not about anything else that we are or that we've done, you see. I think that's why Jesus' good guy is so good and his bad guy is so bad. This lesson right now I don't think is about sowing seed generously and impartially on all the soil, or about raining down the rain and sunning down the sun on all the land. I don't think it's about giving away all of your money to people who can't pay you back. I don't think this lesson is making sure everyone has enough food and safety, or even quite about inviting everyone to your banquet and taking the less prestigious seat. I think this lesson is specifically about none of those things mattering. That they cannot be fulfilling, that they are not enough if we've done them for ourselves. If we think that those actions are what saves us and what gives our life meaning, those are good things to do. Please keep doing those things. There are many, many lessons that make clear that we are to care about and support, that we are not to have contempt for the people who are oppressed and exploited. This lesson, though, this lesson is insisting that we not hold in contempt the people who did it and who are still doing it. Luke's Jesus is saying that whatever else we do is folly in the end if it leads us to arrogance and contempt for anyone. my contempt, even of a sputum like Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, keeps me from the fullness of love. My contempt, even of a pus sack like Steve Bannon, keeps me from humility. I don't know whether I'm joking or not. I'm definitely not joking about what love requires of me and requires of you, and can offer us and wrap us in its fullness if we will not close ourselves off to it. But I'm not sure that I'm joking, name-calling these cold and violent men, these tax collectors. But I'm not above them. As much as I loathe what they do and how they are, though I don't have access to their power or the range of their traumatic impact, I cannot think I'm above them. I must know that I am connected to them, that I have been them with the power that I do have, with the harm radius that I have impacted. Thich Nhat Hanh has this poem, Call Me by My True Names. I think it's talking about what Jesus is talking about. He writes, I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I'm the 12-year-old girl refugee on a small boat who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate, and I am the pirate. My heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom in all walks of life. My pain is like a river of tears, so full it fills the four oceans. Please call me by my true names so I can hear all my cries and laughs at once, so that I can see that my joy and my pain are one. Please call me by my true names so I can wake up, and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. I can't take this all the way to forgiveness. I'm not going to tell you or anyone grieving harm or surviving violence that anger isn't right and good. Not all relationships can be unbroken. I'll leave it to you to wrestle with the angels, whether the standard you hold yourselves to for the fullness of love is forgiveness, and what that means. But it's no accident that the Greek words used here for exalts and humbles are the same words found in the Magnificat and in the baptizer's pronouncement about what is necessary to prepare the way for justice. Luke's Jesus isn't making a suggestion about humility and compassion. These aren't for our consideration. They are foundational to this gospel, to every good news, to maintain righteousness. And they date to the prophets of Israel. I hope that you engage all of this practice. I hope that you grapple with this from the soft embrace and the strong foundation of knowing that you are already good, that you are already dearly beloved. And please engage and grapple, because this is essential. It is essential. And Micah writes, God has shown each of you what is good and what is required of you, only to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. Peace.